In a prosperous kingdom, there once lived an aging king and queen. For many years, they prayed for a child, and at last a daughter was born in the palace, as beautiful as dawn above the winter gardens. Her christening was celebrated with a feast unlike any the kingdom had ever seen. The halls gleamed with gold, the fountains sent rose water into the air, and guests came from every neighboring land. But the queen, dazzled by her happiness, her wealth, and the beauty of the infant, allowed pride to speak in wisdom's place. My daughter has no need of gifts from the fairy folk. She will already possess everything that gold can buy. And so she ordered that neither fairies nor sorcerers be invited to the celebration. No one heard the night give a heavy sigh. Amid the music and laughter, the fateful words were spoken, destined to bring sorrow upon an innocent child. When the final dance had ended, the candles had burned low, and the weary palace had fallen asleep, an extraordinary stillness settled over the newborn princess's chamber. Even the wind paused at the windows, as though waiting for what was about to happen. Beside the cradle appeared a tall woman in a simple yellow cloak woven from autumn leaves. Her face was sorrowful and regal, and her gaze was as calm as the evening sky. She was the keeper of forgotten hearts. She had not come for revenge, but to restore the order that had been disturbed. Approaching the sleeping queen, the keeper spoke so that the queen would hear her words in her dreams. "You were mistaken, my queen. A child does not need everything. She needs a heart that can feel pain as well as joy. Without sorrow, there can be no true happiness." Her voice was wise and impartial. She had come to teach the queen a lesson, and the knight understood that the stern lesson had already begun. At exactly midnight, the keeper approached the cradle. At that same moment, a quiet, unearthly melody drifted in from the palace garden, as though the wind were whistling through silver reeds. It was gentle and alluring, and it seemed meant not for the ears, but for the heart itself. The sleeping child gave the faintest sigh. Then, leaving neither wound nor drop of blood, a small, warm heart slipped free of her chest, pink, glowing, and light as a bird. Tiny transparent wings trembled at its sides, soft and delicate as a dragonfly's. The heart hovered above the cradle as though saying farewell. The keeper watched it in sorrowful silence. Then the window opened of its own accord, and the heart flew out into the night garden, disappearing forever among the dark trees and shimmering stars. And so all that was warmest and most alive left the palace, leaving the princess with a flawless but cold shell. The little winged heart flew into the night garden and, trembling in the cool air, followed the keeper in the yellow cloak. She rose above the trees, and the heart soared after her. Higher than the palace towers, higher than the sleeping clouds. They flew past the pale moon and clusters of cold white stars, until far away, at the very edge of the sky, a single warm light appeared. A red star shone there, distant, quiet and alive, as though it held the memory of every feeling that had ever been lost. The keeper extended her hand, and the heart vanished into the star's crimson light. Back at the palace, a beautiful, healthy child continued to sleep in her golden cradle. No one yet knew that the princess was destined to live without a heart, while the little exiled heart would wait for the one who would someday set out to find it. The years passed, and Princess Joan grew into a young woman of rare beauty. Her eyes were bright and clear, her mind was keen, and her every movement was effortless and perfectly graceful. Everything the Queen had once promised her daughter seemed to have come true. But for years, the court had noticed something strange, though it was spoken of only in whispers. Joan remained unnaturally calm. Even as a child, she never cried when she hurt herself. If she fell from a horse, she rose without a word and brushed away the dust. She never lost her temper or made childish demands. Yet neither did she laugh with all her heart, gasp with delight, or wipe away tears of joy. Her face always wore the same quiet, courteous calm, smooth and impenetrable as the surface of a frozen lake on a windless day. Her beauty was flawless, but it was the perfection of a statue, in whose marble breast nothing living stirred. One day, the old gardener, who had served at the palace all his life, came to Joan and bowed deeply. His face was wet with tears. His young daughter had fallen gravely ill, and he begged to be allowed to go home. "I am sorry," the princess said, regarding him with cool bewilderment. "But why can you not simply pruning the roses? Your tears will not help her." The gardener stepped back, shaken, not by the cruelty of her words, but by their calm and flawless emptiness. Another time, Joan's beloved greyhound, who had grown up beside her, became old and died one morning in her lap. The princess slowly stroked its cooling fur, but not a muscle in her face moved. "What a pity," she said to her lady-in-waiting. "She ran very fast. Now I will need another dog." Joan wished no one harm. She saw tears, but did not know their salty taste. She saw death, but did not feel its cold breath. It seemed that an invisible wall of clear glass stood between Joan and the rest of the world. Through it, the princess saw everything: the pain, joy, fear, and love of others. She noticed trembling hands, happy smiles, and tears clinging to eyelashes. And she could explain precisely why people laughed, forgave, or grieved. She spoke of such things calmly and thoughtfully, like a scholar describing the habits of rare animals. But no feeling ever passed through the cold glass. The grief of others awakened no sorrow in her. Their happiness brought her no warmth, and their love stirred no tenderness. Everything remained on the other side. And so Joan lived among people, heard their voices, and knew their stories. But she did not belong to their world. She was an eternal spectator in the theatre of life, able to see everything, yet unable to weep or laugh with the audience. The Queen watched her daughter pass by the joys and sorrows of others without feeling their warmth. And at night, she wept bitterly in her chamber. Joan was near, beautiful, alive, and obedient, yet her soul seemed infinitely far away, like a pearl that had fallen into the depths of a silent ocean. The Queen remembered the christening and the fateful words she had spoken in the blindness of pride. "I am the one who left her without a heart," she whispered. Then the old nurse, the only person who had been awake that night and had seen the woman in the yellow cloak, would sit beside her and take the Queen's hand. "Do not scold her, Your Majesty, and do not blame yourself," she would say. "She is neither cold nor cruel. She has simply lost what allows a human heart to feel warmth. Her heart is not here." In a neighbouring friendly kingdom lived Crown Prince Michael. He was nothing like the young nobles who dreamed of noisy hunts, tournament victories, and songs celebrating their own glory. Michael preferred the stillness of old libraries, where he spent hours reading forgotten chronicles and legends. At night he climbed a high tower, studied the starry sky, and tried to understand what secrets lay hidden between those cold lights. He was kind, attentive to small details, and something of a dreamer. On his walks, Michael noticed what others passed without seeing: a bird's tracks in the snow, the tremble of a leaf, a solitary light in a distant window. Other princes sought glory on the battlefield, while he searched the world for hidden harmony and for wonders revealed only to a patient heart. Michael's dearest friend and mentor was an old keeper of the stars who lived in a tall, round observatory on a mountain. There, among brass telescopes, maps of the constellations, and clocks that measured the movement of the heavens, he guarded his greatest treasure: an enormous book bound in moonlit silver. Its pages glowed with a gentle light, and the portraits within were not painted, but alive. Kings frowned, princesses smiled, old dukes sighed, and some faces wept silent tears. The book showed not the ceremonial splendor of the world's nobles, but their true nature, like an all-seeing eye that could never be deceived. Michael loved to visit in the evenings, slowly turn the heavy pages, and watch distant lives unfold beneath his thoughtful gaze. It was not truly a book, but a silent theatre of human souls, where every portrait revealed its one true roll. One evening, as he turned the pages of the book of living portraits, Michael noticed a page that had not been there before. On it stood the young Princess Joan in a simple white dress with a wreath of golden daisies in her hair. A light breeze stirred the fabric of her sleeves, and the garden around her breathed with summer light. Yet she remained motionless and serene. Michael thought he had never seen a more beautiful face. But it was not her beauty alone that struck him. Joan's eyes were clear and calm, yet deep within them lay an endless, unfathomable emptiness. It was not coldness or arrogance, but rather the silence of a room in which no one had lived for a very long time. He could not look away. Admiration and an inexplicable compassion pierced his heart. Michael fell in love, not with a smile, for there was none, but with the mystery of that quiet emptiness, which he desperately longed to fill with warmth. Michael studied the portrait for a long time, then asked his mentor who the young woman was. The old keeper of the stars shook his head sadly. "Do not fall in love with a portrait, Prince," he said. "This young woman is as beautiful as the morning star, but just as cold, for she is unhappy." And the keeper told Michael what he had once read in the movements of the heavenly lights. The Queen's pride, the judgment passed that night, and the heart that had flown from the newborn princess's chest. Until her heart is returned to her, neither she nor anyone who stands beside her will ever know true happiness. She may become a queen, but she cannot be a wife. She may inspire admiration, but she cannot give love. Yet Michael did not turn back. The warning became his purpose, and the impossible became the path he chose to follow, even if it led him beyond the edge of the sky. The living portrait was no longer enough for Michael, and one day he journeyed to Joan's palace. He arrived without royal insignia, servants, or fine clothing, disguised as a poor traveller, so that no one would hide the truth from him. In the garden, he saw the princess beside a marble fountain. She was every bit as beautiful as she had appeared in the enchanted book. A pale dress, golden hair, and a calm, clear face. Joan was feeding the goldfish and speaking with her ladies-in-waiting. But Michael noticed what others did not. Her every gesture was flawless, yet seemed rehearsed in advance. Her smile appeared at the proper moment, but never warmed her eyes. Her carefully chosen words sounded as though she were reciting someone else's lines, without understanding what they meant. He saw both her beauty and her emptiness at once. A beautiful life, sealed forever behind cold glass. A young maid hurried toward the princess. She was weeping and could barely catch her breath as she begged to be allowed to go home. Her father was gravely ill and might not survive the night. "Your duty is to serve here," Joan replied coolly. Will your father recover merely because you sit beside his bed? The girl covered her face with her hands and ran away, shaking with sobs. Ordinarily, the princess forgot such scenes at once. But this time, she did not turn away. Joan watched the maid leave, and in her clear eyes appeared a new and almost imperceptible uncertainty. Why did it hurt the girl so much? Michael, who had been watching from behind the hedge, later saw the princess summon her nurse. "Take a warm blanket and a basket of the finest fruit to their home," she ordered quietly. It was not compassion yet, but for the first time, reason had led her to act with something resembling human kindness. Her heart remained silent, yet the right question had already made the first crack in the wall of glass. Meanwhile, the kings of the two realms arranged for Joan and Michael to marry. Looms began to sound throughout the palace as a blue gown was made for the princess, and the long galleries were adorned with white flowers. But after seeing the first crack in the wall of glass surrounding her, Michael made the most important decision of his life. He asked for a secret meeting with the Queen and the old nurse. "I love her more than life itself," he said, "and that is precisely why I will not marry her now. Not until she can say yes or no to me with a heart that is truly her own and truly free. To marry her now would be to lock her inside another prison, one even more beautiful than the first. I will go in search of what was stolen from her. I ask only one thing of you. Wait for me. But if I return and Joan chooses someone else, I will accept her choice. Her freedom matters more to me than my own happiness." And so Michael gave up the wedding in order to restore Joan's soul. And that sacrifice became his truest proof of love. At dawn, Michael led his horse to the palace gates. Joan was already waiting there, motionless in the pale morning light. "Why are you leaving?" she asked with genuine bewilderment. "Everything is already prepared. The wedding gifts, the white flowers, and the music." Michael smiled gently. "Because one day, I want to hear not the music prepared for us, but the music that plays within your own heart. I want to hear what you want." He bowed, swung into the saddle, and rode away. Joan watched him for a long time, until his figure vanished along the sunlit road. Then, within the familiar silence inside her, something new appeared. A faint, almost imperceptible emptiness left by someone's departure. He left her not a ring, but a question her entire future life would have to answer. Before setting out, Michael once more climbed to the old Keeper of the Stars' round observatory and told him of his decision. The old man listened in silence, then inclined his head with respect. "I knew your heart would choose this path," he said. From a silver casket, he took a large, perfectly round lens of mountain glass, smooth and clear as a frozen drop of sky. "This is no ordinary glass. By day, it will allow you to look at the sun without going blind. By night, it will dim the light of every cold white star and reveal a single one, warm, pulsing, and red. That is the star of her heart. Follow it, and it will lead you to what you seek." And so Michael received not a map of earthly roads, but a celestial compass that pointed the way to the princess's lost soul. Thus began Michael's long journey. He travelled mostly by night, when the red star appeared above the road, and its warm light showed him the way. The prince crossed sleeping fields where night-blooming bellflowers chimed softly in the tall grass, and crickets chirped their steady, soothing songs. Sometimes he stopped beneath old, spreading linden trees, and the air around him was filled with a rich, honeyed fragrance. Leaves whispered gently overhead, while his horse grazed peacefully nearby. At isolated campfires, Michael met fishermen and shepherds. They told him, in unhurried voices, stories of distant rivers, forgotten roads, and stars that saw more than people did. Slowly, he learned to hear the breathing of the vast world of night. His journey was not a battle, but a pilgrimage. He travelled beneath the shelter of night, accompanied by silence, the rustling of the grass, and the distant light of a single star. After a long journey, the red star at last led Michael to the shore of a cold, boundless sea. According to ancient tales, no one from his kingdom had ever crossed that grey expanse. The prince understood that from there, his path would continue over the water, but he did not seek out a royal ship with carved sides and silk banners. In a small fishing village, Michael found a grey-haired boat builder and commissioned a vessel from him. Small, sturdy, well sealed with pitch, and dependable in a storm. "And make the sail from plain, unbleached linen," he asked. And so the linen-coloured boat came into being, modest, enduring, and steadfast like its owner, ready to withstand the harsh winds of the sea. Michael had no need of luxury. His purpose was his treasure, and for the journey, he needed only something he could rely on. Michael sailed out onto the quiet, boundless sea. By day, when the red star vanished in the sunlight, he lowered the linen sail and let the boat rock upon the gentle waves. Then the prince ate a simple meal of bread and dried fruit, drank water, and watched the clouds drift slowly overhead. When night fell, the warm red lantern appeared once more in the sky. Michael raised the sail, and the boat obediently continued on its way. Around him were only the soft lapping of the waves, the steady rustle of the linen sail, and the distant light of the star. At times, it seemed that he was sailing not across the sea, but through the night sky itself, a small star following another. And so the days and nights passed in complete solitude, alone with his thoughts, the silence, and his unchanging purpose. After many long months at sea, the red star began to shine more brightly and sank lower toward the horizon with each passing night. Michael understood that his journey was nearing its end. At dawn, land emerged from the mist, a deserted rocky island surrounded by still grey waters. On its highest peak stood a great castle of black stone. It seemed neither frightening nor ruined. On the contrary, its towers were tall and graceful, but its dark windows remained motionless, as though the castle had fallen into a deep and endless sleep. A vast garden spread around it. Once carefully tended, it was now overgrown with wild roses, tangled ivy, and tall grass beneath the cold breath of the slowly brightening sky. There was nothing evil about the island. It held only silence, oblivion, and the sorrow of centuries. It seemed to be a lost heart itself, forgotten in the middle of the ocean, still beating softly in the rustle of the grass. Michael came ashore on the rocky beach and pulled the boat onto the damp sand. A small cottage stood at the water's edge, and an old gardener was waiting in front of it. His clothes were simple, his hands were covered with earth, and his weary eyes seemed to reflect long years of loneliness. He did not ask the traveller's name or show any surprise at his arrival. "Why have you come?" he asked. Michael answered honestly, "I am searching for the stolen heart of Princess Joan." The gardener studied him for a long time, as though searching for the truth, not in Michael's words, but somewhere deep within him. Then he slowly nodded. He was not the keeper of a prison, but a prisoner of the island himself. Long ago, the gardener had also lost his heart, and ever since, he had been condemned to tend the sleeping castle and the garden that had gone wild. His eyes held the weariness of a man who had waited far too long, uncertain whether he was waiting for freedom or for someone capable of breaking the ancient spell. The guardian led Michael up the stone path and stopped before a high wall. Beyond it lay a garden choked with ivy, thorny bushes, and dry branches. Old pathways and stone fountain basins were barely visible among them. "The castle where the hearts are kept will not open for someone who merely wishes to take what is inside," the gardener said. "It can be entered only when life, awakened from its sleep, calls someone inside." Michael waited silently for him to continue. "A heart can be recovered only if you patiently care for something that does not yet belong to you, and continue to do so for a very long time. You must awaken this sleeping garden, return water to the fountains, light to the windows, and flowers to the earth." "How much time do I have?" the prince asked. 7 long years. Michael looked at the overgrown trees and understood that he had come as a knight prepared for battle, only to discover that he would have to become a gardener. His greatest enemy would not be a monster, but time. The guardian opened the heavy gate and led Michael beyond the stone wall. Before them lay the sleeping garden. The earth, parched by years without water, was covered in cracks, and dark, lifeless seeds lay scattered across its surface. Empty bird cages with tarnished doors stood along the paths, while the dry beds of streams wound between grey stones like forgotten silver ribbons. But at the very centre of the garden stood an enormous glass dome. Beneath it, coiled in snow-white spirals, slept a beautiful serpent. Her scales shimmered with a soft, pearly light, and under her warm wing, in a nest of silver threads, lay 7 smooth silver eggs. "This is the soul of the garden," the guardian said. "When your labour and patience bring life back to this place, the serpent will awaken, and small white birds will hatch from the eggs. When they rise into the sky, the castle will open its doors." Michael understood that the 7 eggs were 7 notes of silence, destined to become a song of awakening and fill the island with hope once more. And so began 7 long years of quiet labour. Michael settled in a small house by the sea, which he built with his own hands from dark stone and whitewashed wood. In the morning, the whisper of the waves woke him, and in the evening, he heard the distant cries of gulls. Year after year, season after season, he brought the garden back to life. Stone by stone, he repaired the old wall. He carefully cleared the dry stream beds until one day, a thin, clear stream began to flow through them with a soft, musical murmur. He placed white lily seeds in the cool earth, covered them with his hands, and waited patiently for the first shoots. Michael made small feeding trays for the empty bird cages and filled them with grain every morning. Spring followed winter, and summer heat gave way to autumn rain. His heroism no longer revealed itself in the swing of a sword, but in the quiet movement of his hands. Every evening, Michael sat beside the sea, looked up at the red star, and thought of Joan. Each lily became a silent vow of devotion. Meanwhile, Joan had begun a quiet labour of her own at the palace. Michael's words and his departure had left an unfamiliar emptiness within her, and the princess resolved to understand what she could not feel. She felt no compassion, but she remembered the maid's tears. And so, one day, she went to the old gardener and asked whether his daughter had recovered. She did not understand affection, but she saw how people grieved, and she ordered that an old blind hound be allowed to remain at the palace, with a warm bed beside the fireplace. Joan read letters from soldiers' families, and for the first time gave orders not about taxes, but about aid for widows. In the evenings, she sat beside her mother by the fire. She did not understand why it mattered, but she noticed that her presence seemed to warm the Queen's heart. There was still no heart in Joan's chest, yet she was learning to act as though one were there. Every act of kindness became a tentative step toward her own soul. On the morning of the first day of the 7th year, Michael went out into the garden as usual and stopped, unable to believe his eyes. Everything had changed in a single night. Where dry earth had lain only the day before, Hundreds of white lilies now swayed in the breeze, their petals covered with clear drops of dew. Radiant birds from paradise sat in the cages with their doors thrown open, and sang so brightly and clearly that they seemed to be greeting the dawn. Crystal clear streams flowed through the stone channels Michael had spent so many years clearing of sand and roots, filling the air with their gentle murmur. The sleeping garden had awakened. The young leaves whispered in the trees. Flowers reached toward the sun, and golden butterflies circled above the paths. For 7 years, the garden had gathered Michael's patience and care within itself, so that one day it might bloom in gratitude. Every white flower became an echo of his silent love. Michael approached the glass dome at the center of the awakened garden. The white serpent was no longer sleeping. She slowly raised her wise head and looked at him with calm gratitude. At that moment, a faint cracking sound came from beneath her wing. One after another, fine cracks appeared across the 7 silver eggs. The shells opened, and 7 small, dazzling white birds emerged. They spread their wings and soared together into the sky. After making one solemn circle above Michael, the birds settled on the highest roof of the black castle. Then the door in the ancient stone wall, closed for countless centuries, moved silently and slowly opened. The 7 birds, born of patience and care, had become living keys. The way to the hearts was open. When the ancient door opened, the old gardener, the island's guardian, approached Michael. For the first time in all those years, a faint smile lit his weary face. "You have done what I could not," he said. "You awakened the garden. Now your path leads inside." He held out an ancient golden sword, adorned with delicate patterns and transparent stones. "This is the key sword. It will open every door in the castle. But remember what matters most. Do not fight. No enemies live here, only shadows of temptation. This sword obeys only one who has come not to conquer or seize anything, but to return what was lost." Michael accepted the weapon with both hands. He had been given a sword, yet told not to raise it in battle. And he understood that the final trial would test not his strength, but the purity of his purpose. Michael entered the castle and passed through a long succession of silent rooms. Behind the first door stood a table laden with hot dishes, sweet fruit, and deep red wine. After 7 years of labor, the mere fragrance could have robbed him of his resolve. "I am searching for the heart of Princess Joan, not for myself, for her," Michael said, and walked past. Behind the second door stood a beautiful stranger. She reached out her hands to him and promised rest, love, and an end to his journey. Michael bowed politely. "I am searching for the heart of Princess Joan, not for myself, for her. Behind the third door, he saw Joan herself, beautiful and cold. "You have found me," she said. "Stay, and I will become your wife. We will rule here forever." But Michael looked at her through the enchanted glass and saw only a transparent shadow. "I am searching for the heart of Princess Joan, not for myself, for her." And the castle understood that Michael's devotion could not be shaken or deceived. After passing through the final door, Michael entered the largest hall in the castle. Yet there was no gold, no thrones, and no tapestries. The grey walls faded into the dimness. The air was motionless, and the silence seemed older than the island itself. At the center of the hall, seated on a simple stone chair, was a tall woman in a yellow cloak woven from autumn leaves. Her face was sorrowful and regal. The keeper of forgotten hearts was waiting for him. "You have traveled a long way, Prince Michael," she said. "Not only across land and sea. You have followed the path of patience, learning to care for what did not belong to you, and the path of temptations, rejecting everything that was offered for your benefit alone. You have proven yourself worthy." Michael lowered the keysword. Before him stood neither an enemy nor an ally, but an impartial judge who had recognized the purity of his purpose. The keeper slowly extended her hands toward Michael. In them lay the small pink heart of Princess Joan. It trembled faintly, and its transparent wings, delicate as rose petals, fluttered faintly in the still air. "You could have demanded her hand while she was unable to refuse," the keeper said. "But you did not seek a bride. You sought her freedom. You wanted her to be able to choose her own path, her own love, and her own destiny. That is why the heart may be returned." She carefully placed it in Michael's hands. The heart was warm and light, like a living bird resting trustfully in his hands. "When the time comes, open your hands and say, 'Heart of Joan, the long journey is over. You have been apart from her for too long. Fly home. Someone is waiting for you there.'" And Michael understood that he was holding not a reward, but a fragile freedom won for Joan through 7 years of patience and silent, steadfast love. Michael carried the winged heart with great care, and the journey home was as swift as thought. On the day exactly 7 years had passed since he made his promise, he reached Joan's kingdom. But the streets were decorated with flowers. Bells rang above the rooftops, and festive carriages hurried toward the palace. Michael learned the terrible news. The royal council had grown tired of waiting and had persuaded the king to marry Joan to the wealthy, elderly, and cruel ruler of a neighboring country to secure a military alliance. The ceremony was already beginning. The princess had agreed without protest, because she could not feel the difference between a marriage she truly wanted and one that would bring her misery. The guards did not recognize the exhausted traveler in the plain cloak. They mistook him for a vagrant and locked him in a small tower beside the garden until the wedding ceremony was over. Michael had spent 7 years searching for her heart so he could restore her freedom, only to return at the very moment that freedom was being taken away. Michael stood at the narrow tower window and heard the wedding music drawing nearer. Below, a procession moved along the garden path. Joan rode at its head in a magnificent gown, beautiful, but seemingly meant for someone else. The prince understood that he had only one moment left. He took out the small pink heart. It trembled in his hands, and its transparent wings fluttered anxiously. When Joan passed directly beneath the window, Michael lifted the heart to the bars and opened his hands. Heart of Joan, the long journey is over. Take joy with you, and take sorrow. Fly home. Someone is waiting for you there. The heart fluttered upward and flew out of the tower. Michael released it like a bird from a cage, entrusting 7 years of hope to its 2 tiny wings, and sending it toward the princess he loved, more than his own happiness or destiny. The small pink heart flew above the white flowers of the garden and gently settled on Joan's shoulder. The princess gave a sudden start. The heart touched her neck, flared with warm light, and disappeared without a trace as it entered her chest. No thunder rolled. Instead, the world became extraordinarily quiet, as though all of nature had drawn a breath and held it with her. And in that silence, Joan heard everything for the first time. She heard her mother weeping softly among the guests, and the weary breathing of the old gardener who held the floral arch. She felt the pain of others as clearly as though it had become her own. She remembered the maid's eyes, the warm blanket, 7 long years of waiting, and the man in the travel-worn cloak who had once asked what she herself wanted. The glass wall within her shattered. Pain, joy, guilt, tenderness, and love rushed into her soul all at once. The world was suddenly alive, close to her, achingly dear, and infinitely precious. Joan wept for the first time in her life, not from suffering, but from the fullness of feeling. Then she stopped the procession, turned her horse, and galloped toward the tower where Michael was imprisoned. Joan ordered Michael's immediate release. Then she herself called off the wedding to the foreign king. Her counselors were horrified, but for the first time, her parents wept with joy. When Michael came out of the tower, he asked for no reward, and made no mention of the 7 years of waiting. "Now you are free," he said with a smile. "You may choose any path." Joan looked at him. Her eyes were alive now, warm and filled with love. "I know, and I want my path to continue beside yours. Not from duty, but because my heart chooses it. Give me time so that we may come to know each other anew." A year later, Joan herself asked Michael to become her husband. They celebrated a quiet wedding, and 7 white lilies were planted in the royal garden, one for each of the 7 years of his journey of patience.